Like cooking, everything has a recipe.
A set of instructions to follow in order to gain a certain result.
Music is no different.
Be it ingredients for a dish, a set list for an amazing show,
Or a release strategy for a successful launch.
these are all recipes.
Hi, we're your hosts, Sean.
And I'm Brandon.
Come and join us in our kitchen as we go through the Music Makers Cookbook.
Let's get cooking.
Welcome to the Music Makers Cookbook, the podcast where we talk to musicians about recipes for success in the music industry. You heard our introduction. I'm Sean. That's Brandon, and we're gonna do some chit chat before we jump right into it. So how you doing, Brandon?
Hey, I've been good. We were just talking right before we just started about fancy restaurants and if we've ever been to a really fancy place like that. I
Very
haven't
on
been.
topic.
Very on topic.
Very on brand.
We love food,
Very on
man.
brand. Yeah,
so
love food.
that's our branding. Check out that episode if it's out.
It'll be
now.
out, yeah.
We'll figure that out. But if you haven't listened yet, go back and check it out. We highly recommend it. Thank you.
After this one. Anyways, you've been talking about fancy
restaurants. We both said that we've never been to one, but I will say that there was just one time. Do you know Fishbones in Detroit?
Fishbones. Is that in that mall?
It's like
There's like this giant building that's got a bunch of restaurants.
yeah,
in it.
it's like
Is it that one?
It's like right downtown. It's kind of near Ford Field and Comerica Park a little bit. It's probably an offshoot from it. I don't know exactly where it's at.
No, I haven't been to that one then.
Yeah, it's not really fancy, but it is more expensive being downtown Detroit. And so I took my fiance and her friends to a Taylor Swift show in 2017, and my fiance is a big Taylor Swift fan, and I am as well. Go
Swift.
Taylor, man. Well, we'll talk about Taylor a lot on here.
Oh yeah, because she definitely knows her brand.
Genius.
She is
absolutely magical. Anyways, this is my first time Ubering too. And I get in the car and I'm like, man, it smells like weed. I have to sit up front and this dude's not saying anything to me. So we pull out of the neighborhood and we go down the street a little bit. And I eventually go, hey man, thanks again for bringing us, downtown. Like, I appreciate you picking us up. I know it's all sort of serviced it out and I paid for whatever. But you can be thankful. Thanks, dude. I appreciate you taking your time out there. He's like, oh, no problem. He's like, I'm heading down to work actually right now. Anyways, I'm the general manager of Fishbones, and this dude is having the greatest time on the road all the way there. Like, we're all having a great time. Like, he's hyping me up, and he's weaving in and out of traffic. Like on 475, I think it is down there. He's going in and out of traffic. He's jumping curbs and he eventually parks into this big parking garage. He's like, I'll meet you guys inside. He's like rolling up his cuffs and shit. And we get in there and he sits us at the bar and he's coming out like rolling his cuffs and he's like acting like such a badass. We get free drinks. We get free appetizer. We get a tour of the facility. And we were like, dude, this is awesome. And he was like, I will also pick you guys up after the show, but make sure that you order Uber down here and then I'll drop yourselves off in Dearborn and then pick yourselves up from there because it'll be cheaper in the long run. I was like, this guy is
he hooking you up,
dude. I was so excited. That was my one positive Uber experience. That was the only time. All the other guys have gotten lost or took wrong turns. This guy was awesome. Shout out to Alex, man. If he ever sees this or comes across from it, I appreciate it, and I never forgot that experience. Never forgot it. And experience is a big thing, which we'll also talk about on the podcast too, because if you have one of those experiences, you'll never forget it too. And there's ways that you can provide that for not only yourselves, your friends, your family, but for also your audience and your fans.
Oh, yeah.
But we'll get to that.
People remember experiences. People remember emotions.
Yep.
Not necessarily all the nitty-gritty details of it, but the way it makes you feel as a whole. So today we're going to be talking about, kind of a scary topic, a very, very big one, and that is like releasing your music. And you got how to have a strategy behind it, especially in 2023, just the ways of going about it. Because the music industry, it's always changing, but it's drastically changed, especially recently. Music's coming all over the place. It's super competitive out there. And then on top of it, out of all the musicians out there, 80% of artists on Spotify have less than 50 monthly listeners to it. So even once it is out, it's not finding traction. And it all starts with the music. Good music is the most important thing, but there's things you have to do to aid it, and having a release strategy can put it in front of the right people who will appreciate your music to share it to more people so that your music can actually grow. It's an integral part of music. It doesn't end with you after the song's created. It ends when it's listened and enjoyed and helps or does whatever you want your music to do, tells your story. It's the connection aspect of it. So the release strategy is so integral because you got to put it out there.
Very, very important stuff. This is a very common issue I see a lot personally with working with people is they don't know how to exactly release their songs or how to package their songs into a format where people are going to discover it, and not only that, but actually listen to it and enjoy it and listen all the way through.
Yeah.
So, which means albums and EPs are in a weird stage at this point of the game right now.
By the end of this episode, you will have a better idea of how to create a release strategy that fits your music. We're going through a couple different options on what they all mean. So after listening to it, you'll know what fits you, and also how your release can build interest, not just in your music, but you as a brand, what you stand for. And as we said, we have another episode that talks more about why it's important to build a brand. You can listen to that after this one.
Yes.
And this release strategy builds into that. So let's get started.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
To start off, let's start with some of the things that people do that isn't helping, so that we can kind of work backwards from there. Like, what are the common things that we see all the time?
Yeah, I see personally for me, and I'm sure you can speak to this too, is people want to release an album. No, it's not wrong. I think you should release an album, and I think that's a very integral part of the experience overall as a musician yourselves. And I'm sure it's a dream that a lot of people have had for a very long time. But the long format stuff these days is really tough to market because the attention spans are very short these days.
Yeah.
And to get people to listen to a song is hard enough. To get people to listen to 7, 8, 9, 10 tracks is even harder, and you're gonna have to put in more work. So framing your project and just deciding between long format and short format is a very common issue that I see a lot of the time. And these issues also have implications that can also damage the short-term experience and the long-term experience of your artistry. And it's something to be very mindful of, and really try to just frame it in a way that is listenable for your audience, but also satisfying for yourself.
Let's kind of even talk about, because I agree with that, but let's even talk about what an album is even nowadays. Like when the album first released, it was vinyl, and it was a sit down, listen to this format. Before that, 45s singles were the big thing. All the artists would release singles. That's just how the music industry worked. It shifted to vinyl when long form media content came out, and artists made stuff around that. I mean, if you look at like Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, which everyone knows is a phenomenal album. It's a 44-minute long album. Why? No, it's a 43-minute long album. Why is it 43 minutes? Because vinyl records have about 22 minutes of high-quality audio playback before it goes really bad on each side. So that media limits it. So albums were about, 8, 10 songs, that kind of length, and they were all within 45 minutes or less of the full experience. Then it went to CD. Well, CD can have, I think it's up to 80 minutes.
Yes.
Of audio, Yep. So albums could get a little bit longer. Also, it was digital now. It could get a little bit faster. I just skipped over cassette because I'm skipping over cassette. We could go 8-track, cassette, all that kind of stuff, but I'm just going straight to CD. It expanded. It got longer. It could get louder. It completely changed how artists made albums. Well, then it switched to digital. There's no limitation.
None.
There's a country artist right now. I keep forgetting his name, but he released like a 36-song album.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and what is that an album? What is an album?
I got a great example for you. Mac DeMarco just released a 200-song album.
Woo!
200. Whew. Crazy. Unheard of back in the day. You couldn't do it. It actually it was not possible. The only way you could is selling multiple vinyls in one package, and I mean, good luck getting people to pay for that.
Oh yeah, especially getting someone to produce that. That's a lot of materials.
Lots of materials.
But so that's what the album is, and then the EP is like, okay, it's less songs. It's maybe like 4 to 7, and a single is, well, what even is that? Like when you submit to Spotify now or digital online, you can have multiple songs as a single release.
Yes,
it's not necessarily a single. It can be however you want it to be. You can have a 15-song EP. You can have a 3-song album. Like the words don't really matter as much anymore.
Yeah.
So that just thinking of it that way completely changes what exactly you want to release an album. Well, what even is that? And we're going to go into it a little bit further down the line about what different strategies you can do, what makes sense. But I'm going to say my piece right now. If you're going to release an album, there's nothing wrong with that. Release your art however you want. It's not how these platforms are optimized to promote your music. And if you do want to release an album, and you don't have a strong following, if you have a strong following, you can release an album and people will listen.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to build interest, releasing an album, it's very hard to promote. And if the whole thing isn't one piece of art and doesn't say something, it's just a collection of songs, then what's the point of the album?
Right.
So unless there's a full vision for it, maybe stay away from that. But a thing that we see all the time is people want to release that album because that's what you do in the music industry. You write a bunch of songs, you record them in the studio, you get them mixed, you get them mastered, and you release the album. Okay, fair enough. Well, I have artists that send me their stuff and they'll say, yeah, I've been working on this album for 2 years, 3 years, 7 years, 15 years, 20 years. I've had, I think 22, 23 years was the longest.
Wow.
I got for me. He literally brought in cassettes that he recorded on a 4-track demo. He's like, this is where it all started. Really cool.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, if you're waiting for this whole thing to be complete, like, no, I need another song. I need 12 songs. I need 12 songs. One, you're stressing yourself out because you think you need to write more music. You're holding off releasing your music, so you're not putting things out there for people to establish, and you're just getting yourself back. And a big part of that is fear mindset. A big part of it is not wanting to put yourself out there, but also just thinking that's what I need to do. That's not what you need to do.
Yeah, and a lot of it is to procrastination, because what do you do after you release your music, right? You put all this time into it, and then you still have a long way to go. It's the truth, and prolonging that not only makes you feel better about yourself, to be honest, but you devalue the music itself, I think, at a certain point too, because now you start kind of like just putting songs together. Like you were saying, is an album a collection of songs, or is it actually an art piece where it's cohesive and everything kind of feeds into each other? Like we said, however you want to release your music is fine. However you want to frame your music is fine. But there are these unwritten rules, I would say, maybe guidelines that you should follow. But procrastination will almost always devalue what you're doing in the long run.
Well, then let's talk about a little bit further in that for a second. How many times, I can't even tell you how many times I've worked with artists where the project goes long.
Yep.
They want to add songs, change things up, bring new people in, which is super cool. Album goes long, takes a long time. Or I need another song, but I'm in a writer's block. I can't write a new song, but I can't release it yet because I need that 12th song. And it can be demoralizing. And then, maybe I'm not as good of an artist as I thought I was. I can't write this final song. Oh, it's taking long. Oh, I can't nail this. It gets demoralizing as an artist. And there's nothing out there yet for them to get reinvigorated by the music. Now, there's a bunch of different release methods, single EP, album. Then there's like the waterfall method, which I really want to talk about later. There's actually a lot of systems. Like there's 3 different main things in the waterfall method. But if you release drip songs out here and there, you will get feedback. You will hear people saying, oh, I really like this. People will start to listen to your music. And that's my experience for myself and for all the artists I've worked with. They want people to hear their music.
Yeah.
And it can be revigorating to be like, oh yeah, I released the single 2 weeks ago and it's got, 1,000 plays or 10,000 plays or 20,000 plays, or even if it's like, it's got 50 plays.
Yeah.
It's getting out there and it can make you shoot out more motivation or inspiration to work on more music or motivate you to get back in the studio or to practice more to nail that take. It's a huge mental thing.
Absolutely. The feedback loop is one of the most important parts, I think, that you brought up. You made a lot of really great points that I wish I could go back and like touch on each one. But the one that stands out the most is the feedback loop. When you're not sharing your music with somebody and you're just listening to it by yourself, you sometimes will gain a perspective that your music is good. Now, I'm not saying your music isn't good now, but the more you listen to something, the more you get used to it. It's just a psychological thing that you start to convince yourself that this is indeed my best work that I've ever done.
There's a curve though. At a certain point, it starts working the opposite.
For sure. And I want to preface this before we go any further that art is very momentary a lot of the time. Some of your best art will be spur of the moment. It's really hard to have those spurts of moments throughout a 2 4-5 year process. And then sometimes you just end up going back and changing those magical moments eventually because you've heard it so many times. So there you go. You create your negative feedback loop by hearing it so many times. So now you're devaluing your music, like literally in a literal sense. Not only that, you're spending more money on your music over time because you want to add a song, you want to change this part, you want to change that part. Now you're paying more. So now you're actually losing value on your money because now your return on investment has to be way higher. We'll get into return on investment too.
Yes, we will.
And there was one really, I want to go back to the feedback loop one last time. There's this thing called the build, measure, learn loop cycle. I'm going to do a really shitty summarization of this. You put the product out there to start, right? You manufacture a prototype, you put it out there, and then you get feedback on it, and then you go back through the loop and you refine it as you go. That is how most products are made and conceived and worked on conceptually and then released, and then it's done again. And it just keeps looping back through that cycle until it's perfect. It'll never be perfect, but you kind of keep getting better as you go on. Yeah. So there's that feedback loop that you kind of get that we were discussing on. And if you don't have that feedback loop, then you have nothing to build on. You just kind of aimlessly go, and maybe you can gauge yourself pretty well. But having your peers' feedback is extremely important, especially in building an audience. Mm-hmm. It's really important.
Oh, yeah. Now, this is not to say that, okay, you've got your song recorded, it's done, put it out right away.
Right.
Because that's actually another bad thing that
yes, it is.
We see. It is just sometimes I'll send a file and say, give me a link when you post it, expecting to have a link in like a month or two. 2 days later, hey, here's the link.
Yeah.
Please listen to it.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. You didn't promote this at all. Nobody knows it exists except for your warm market. Mm-hmm. There's no new fans coming in, and that's dangerous. That's stagnating. You need to plan out at least a month in advance to try to set yourself up for success. Pitch it to different playlists. Pitch it directly to Spotify. Make content building up to the release. Take snippets of it for social media, for TikTok, short form videos, or behind the scenes images. You can slowly start posting them from when you were in the studio. Just things like that to build interest, to tell the story behind the song or the EP or the album or whatever you're dropping. Build that story behind it so people care about it when it comes out. Now, there are people that do just drop an album and it's there and it's a huge hit. Mm-hmm. Those people have a huge fan base.
Yes.
Those people are Beyonce.
Yes.
And the like, where, hey, album's done, boom. And the fact that it drops makes
Yep.
news,
Yep.
makes waves. Most of us, independent artists, musicians, like, not there.
Yeah, we don't have that luxury.
Exactly. And
Not yet.
So there's more forethought that has to go into it versus just songs done, put it out. Songs done, put it out. If you want people to hear it, if you actually want to make a living doing what you love and making music, this thought process goes into it.
Yeah. Yep. Totally agree.
All right. So at this point, we've kind of talked about some negative things that are some unplanned ways that you can release music that won't give the results maybe necessarily look for. Just put it out there. Basically, having no plan.
Right.
What's the saying? If you have no plan, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have no plan, what we just covered is basically what you do.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about things that you can do that are plans to give you more successful launches and different ways of doing it. And we've kind of phrased it earlier. There's releasing singles, there's EPs, there's albums, and then there's something called the waterfall method. And there's 3 different tiers of that, which, at least in my understanding, which we can go into later on. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming a lot of your clients do a single strategy.
Yeah, a lot of them do the single strategy, which I think is great. Mm-hmm. I think the time allowed before the singles is something to be worked on. So that's something we can definitely touch on for sure. In terms of like uploading, releasing, things of that nature, right? That is most of them. I've been seeing a trend back to EPs recently, which is okay because like I said, this isn't all about. It's not about business 100% of the time if you're not musically satisfied. I think that's really important to talk about too.
Oh yeah.
I think you have to be musically satisfied. And if releasing an EP is the way that you want to do that, then you have to learn how to market an EP. But yes, I have been seeing actually a increase of EPs recently. So a little bit something to think about too. I don't know why that is. I'm not sure if that's just like a music goal with these individuals, if it's just a coincidence, but that is what I've been seeing. What about you?
It's all been album for me, because I mean I do folk rock, and it's all about they really fall hard into it needs to be an album. It needs to be this collection of things. And I'll release a song. I'll release an album once every other year or once every year. And I'm saying if that's part of what you do, and especially if your goal is to have like a strong local thing or whatever, and just try to keep pushing the album, it's completely doable. But what I see the most is that people listen to music on things like Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, whatever it is that you listen to music with.
All the digital streaming platforms,
Yeah. Spotify is the biggest one. And if you go to Spotify, I'm just going to keep referencing that because that's the metric that most people use.
It's the household name.
It's the household name.
Yeah.
That's kind of our vinyl. It's Spotify.
We'll just assume that there's others that fall under the umbrella of Spotify.
Exactly.
When we talk about that. All digital music streaming platforms.
Yeah. But if you look at it, like a social media, it has an algorithm. It has a system built in place to keep people listening to music on their platform, built in place to push certain kinds of songs, certain kinds of people. It wants music to, be put out there, to grow, to keep people on the platform, because there are a lot of people who really like to learn new music, and it wants to put the right music in front of those people. So if you go to Spotify and say, hey, how does your algorithm work? What do you like? They will tell you. We really push for artists that have consistent uploads every 4 to 6 weeks. That's what the algorithm does. So you don't have to play the game, but if you want to play the game and use these platforms to your advantage to find a cold market of fans who don't know about you, but maybe you pop into their artists' recent releases, or some of the Spotify, like I had a artist recently get a song featured on Spotify's Bluegrass and Folk
nice
playlist, and that's 247,000
that's fantastic
people on it. So a couple of those are probably gonna listen to another couple of songs. So if you want to do that, you gotta play the game. Release consistently. It could be singles, it could be EPs. It's harder to do it the more songs you have, obviously,
for sure,
and that's where it goes into the waterfall method. But release consistently so that you are playing into these algorithms and you're actually using them to boost you towards new artists. Now, these platforms really like individual songs. They're not built to push whole albums. So even if you release an album, you still have to pick 1 or 2 songs.
Yes, you do.
From that album that you want to submit to these things.
You can't pitch every song. Cannot.
No.
It won't allow you.
Exactly. It's more of an individual process versus a broad songed thing. So even if you go the album route, you want to pick 1 or 2 to push that bring people back to the album, or 1 or 2 to push if you're going to release a single or an EP that, keep it going forward that consistently 4 to 6 weeks. That's the game.
Yep. 3 things I want to touch on. First of all, not helpful at all, but I've always told people that Spotify is the next closest thing to social media, and it would not surprise me if they actually pivot to some kind of social media platform because of how the algorithm works and how they want you to engage with their platform. It might be coming sometime. I want to put that out there now. So Spotify might be a social media company at some point. I swear to God, that's how the experience is going. All they need to do is integrate a few key features, and it will be a social media platform. Number 2, I swear to God.
Get my tinfoil hat on.
I swear to God. Spotify. So if they want to hire me, that's cool. I got ideas. Number 2, this whole thing that Sean has been discussing right now falls under the term discovery. You are looking to be discovered on Spotify, whether it's through a playlist, whether it's through a natural warm market or a cold market. You are looking to be discovered. Your music is looking to be discovered. So it is the stage of discovery. Number 3, totally forgot what I was going to say for number 3.
I have the memory of a goldfish.
Me too, swear to God. If I have to pick 1 or 2 songs, Sean, don't say that 5 times fast. What's the point of even releasing my album?
There's a couple of reasons. If the whole album tells one thing consistently, and it's all part of a larger concept that you want to tell and push to fans that you think they can attach to, that's one reason. Another reason is if, that art's important to you and you want it all organized to be clean and set together and like your discography or whatever. That's the second reason. Another reason is so you have something for fans to come back to. Kind of like when we release this podcast, we're going to release 3 to 5 episodes on the first day altogether. So if someone listens to the first episode, they can immediately go to the next one. If you release an album and someone likes a song, they can immediately go back and listen to the album. If you release a single and then release the album 5 months later, by the time your album comes out, if you're not consistently building up to it, they might forget about the full album. So those are reasons why you might do it. Aside from that, if you're going to promote each song on the album, like every month or every other month, change the songs, you're basically doing a single release campaign, but all the songs are previously out. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the opposite of the waterfall method, which I keep saying, and I will jump into.
I'm excited to get to that. I'm excited to get to that.
If you've heard the waterfall method, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you really need to stay tuned. We'll get there eventually. Trust me, because I'm super excited to talk about it. But anyways, yeah, that's the only reasons I could think of to release the album still.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree, and I'm glad you brought all those points up. I just wanted to demonstrate those are almost the only reasons I feel like these days to release an album, and it's to satisfy that musical voice in your head, and to be satiated with your release. That is the only thing that I can actually see these days being a viable means to actually justify releasing an album, just because of how music is consumed. We could spit out statistics all day. There are lots of statistics for these digital streaming platforms for sure. And we're not going to do that because I think we've already illustrated that enough on why these are so important, why it's so important to start taking your music and framing it in a way that is digestible and listenable for your audience and reachable for your audience. Reachable. Because that is really big. It's really big. I just wanted you to clear those up for our audience and to also kind of just like frame it in a way that is just like, here are your 3 bullet points on why you might want to do this. So I think you framed it in a really nice way. Thank you for doing that.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
And well, how do you release your music to make it reachable, relatable, like all these things that you were just saying?
Yeah.
Spin out these adjectives. How do you do that? Well,
yeah,
I'm about to go sicko mode. I'm about to rant.
Do it, please. Are we talking about the waterfall?
We're talking about the waterfall release method.
I love it.
Now, most commonly, people think of the waterfall method as just a release of singles every 4 to 6 weeks, playing with the Spotify algorithm. So, song, 4 to 6 months, song, 4 to 6 months, song, so that fans consistently know, hey, new music's coming out. I can keep going back and listening to it. It builds your catalog. It builds your portfolio of your songs and all that. And it's just consistent. Uploads here, there, single. Now, there are a couple other ways you can do the waterfall release method. Before I go into that, do you know what an ISRC code is?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what an ISRC code is? I pointed at the camera. If you're listening audio, you are confused. But ISRC code is the code of your song. It's basically
it's
the
a serial
fingerprint.
number. Yeah. It's your serial number for the song.
Yeah. And it's how they keep track. Yeah. And it's how they keep track of, your royalties, what this individual recording is this individual recording.
Yes. Very important to have on you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, actually, I would say I haven't come across one that doesn't. When you release your things through something like DistroKid or CD Baby or Reverb Nation or whatever, they will automatically assign you one.
Yes, they will.
You just say, yes, give me an ISRC code, and they will give it to your song. That's how you collect royalties on it. That's how they know this recording is your recording. Now, what you can do is you can go back into it and go to your catalog and CD Baby. You can just look at your songs out there, or what DistroKid, same thing. You click your songs, and they will tell you what the ISRC code is.
Yep.
So what you can do is after you release the first single, you can release a second single with different album art and re-upload the first single with it.
Yes.
But when you do that, make sure you say, I already have the ISRC code, give them the one that already exists. Otherwise, it'll create a new file.
Right.
But what this does is it kind of makes a mini EP or bundles the singles together. So it keeps all the plays from the first song because it's the same recording. It knows it's the same recording. It keeps track of the plays, puts it underneath. And now you've got a second thing. It recontextualizes the first song. And then a couple weeks later, you can release another single or 2 singles and make like a 3 or 4 piece thing. New album art, new different concept, change the name of the EP or a single release. You can have like your title single of it and then everything else below it. And what that does is it slowly builds. And it can recontextualize it. So like each single has its own unique artwork. It's kind of, what's going on? This is interesting. Something's building here. And you can keep going up and doing that until you reach your album, where you can have, the main, like the self-titled album if it's your first one or whatever you want it to be called. And then boom, all of them are under it. And most of them already have plays because you have the ISRC code in there and you're building up to this big release. That's kind of like the building waterfall method. And it's kind of cool because you can look back. It's like, oh yeah, this is the single art for this group. This is the single art for this group. And this is the main single. And this is for that group. So there's a storytelling behind it. So if the songs lead one into the next, you can use that to kind of build the story of your album if it connects. And it's more interesting that way.
It is.
Now also, what that does is it allows you to see what songs are popular. So when you do release the full album, you can organize it in certain ways where it's like, okay, I want the most successful one to be first or second on the album. So right off the bat, they like get hooked into it. If your album doesn't have like a set order to it, you can move things around or, let's kind of ride the wave so people are interested throughout the whole album. You can see what sounds people like, what sounds maybe aren't as popular and kind of change that and keep that information. It's all important data moving forward. Now, the second waterfall method is very similar, but instead of like contextualizing each release as its own kind of thing, it's just kind of the same, where it's the same album art, but you just release each single and then you can tie them together. So it's all the same art. It's all the name of the album, but then just one song, 2 songs, 3 songs, 4 songs. So that is legit just building the album. Whereas the first one is each individual one is unique. Now the third one is, once again, you're building the album, but as soon as you upload another song, you keep the same name and everything. You just release the album and like say there's 10 songs on the album, pre-order it or whatever, listen to it. But as soon as you add a new one to it, delete the old list. So that it looks like there's just one thing. Because otherwise, when you do it the first method, each single stays as it exists. The songs that are throughout all of them collect listens and plays throughout every single grouping of it because it's the same song.
Yep.
But each single one saves. So fans can go back and listen to it and see the order of it was built. Or they can follow the journey of this album being birthed. This method is literally just, nope, here's one album, we're just going to add a song to it every couple of months, but it's still the same one piece, it keeps it clean, and then when it's done, that's just all that's left is the album. So a year later, after the whole thing's done, someone goes to your page, it just looks like, hey, here's an album. It keeps it clean, it keeps it from getting too jumbled, and it just kind of helps you promote it a different way as, hey, we're building an album here, versus here are a lot of singles, just we're growing the album. So it contextualizes how you present it to your fans. Now, another method, I said there were 3, but I was actually working with a client of mine, and we kind of came up with a combination of a couple of these things. Here's what we were doing. I really like this idea. Toot my own horn. Pat myself in the back. So he had 16 songs that were all under this main umbrella. He had this huge concept that he wanted to talk about. Everything related to the concept. So we're looking at it and thinking about, okay, well, what songs, like 16's a lot, just so you know, it's going to take you like a year or 2 to get all this done. And you want to take this seriously. You don't want to wait a year or 2. So how can we do this so it's faster, but still tells the overarching story of it? So what we're doing is we took his album apart and said, okay, the song tells the story of the whole album. And the whole album has a beginning, middle, and end to it as well. So we broke down these 16 songs into 4 EPs of 4 songs, each telling a certain concept along the journey that the full album encompasses. And what we're doing is each EP is going to have its own concept. So we're going to release one single, and then a second single, and put the first one underneath it, and then the final 2, and boom, there's the EP. That's 3 months. So that's consistently for 3 months. And that makes it easier to track all of it. And it takes a lot less to record 4 songs than it does to record 16 songs.
Definitely.
And those 3 months where you're posting and promoting give you time to go in the studio and make the next 4 songs. Well, then we're going to release another single, and then another one with it, and then the second EP. different artwork, different concept. It's the growth. And then the third, another single, another second single, then like the third EP, then the fourth EP. So we're going to build 4 EPs. And when you look at them, they tell the story of the album. And once the final EP is done, he is then going to delete all the singles. So they're just, like once the full EP is out, going to delete the singles. So it's just each EP, keep it clean. And then the full album is going to get released with all the songs together. So the singles build the EPs build the album, and the album is the general concept. That gives time to make the songs. So you're not rushed. You can put stuff out and tell your story without having to wait to record, mix, master, write 16 songs. And when it's all said and done, you've got the album, and you actually have these even smaller bite-sized pieces with individual art that tell a specific concept that you can make merch around, that you can talk to people about, that you can do tours about. Like when you're just starting off, like, hey, here's our first EP tour. It's about this dark part or this bright part or this part of the story, and it builds. And then you can release the second EP. You change the way you play live. You change your tours, and you just tell that whole story about it. The whole thing is storytelling, and the whole thing is building the brand. And that is really interesting.
That's great. That's awesome.
So if someone likes the song and the first part,
idea.
Yeah, do it.
I'm taking it.
You do it too. I point at the camera again. Listening, if you do it. That was not a sentence. Listening, if you do it. That's the words I said in the order.
That's okay.
Anyways,
the point stands.
Yeah, but you can be creative. You can combine these things. You can have your EPs, have your singles, have your albums, build to it, fall apart from it, like whichever way you want to do it. But plan it. Which one works for you? Which one tells the story of your music? Which one gets you feeling energized and motivated to keep making your music, to come back again and again, that gets your fans energized and tells the story that what you're trying to do? Whether it gets them to come out and be engaged or to join you along or to feel certain emotions with you or to just let loose, whatever it is you want to do, your release strategy can emphasize that as well.
Genius.
It's so good.
I have nothing to add to that, dude. That is so good. That is so good. I think what you really illustrated here, to break down some of the key points, I'm not going to go into the entire waterfall method. If you missed that, please go back and re-listen to it. I'm not going to digest that for you.
Rewind?
Exactly.
Dude, can you imagine that like people don't know what the rewind sound is?
Oh, I know.
And like some people don't even like, we know it's the rewind icon, but they don't realize that, hey, that was an actual button.
That's like a whole generation of things that are lost, man.
I think it's kind of cool, honestly.
I think it is too.
All right, anyways, that's a tangent.
It just makes me feel old, so.
We are old.
We're old. But anyways, I think a few key things to take away from that is that planning is of utmost importance. When you do something like this, you must plan it out and you must stick to a plan. Sure, you can change the plan along the way, like you were saying. However, the general idea of the plan should ultimately be pretty reinforced and structurally sound. Mm-hmm. So, but also like you can have pivot points in there if you need to change something because something doesn't work out or you have a completely new idea, whatever. Number 2, now that you can change this plan sometimes, do not procrastinate because like you can fall into procrastination real quick. If this plan is followed to a T, right? This entire project should be done within how long?
About a year and a half.
Okay. If you start going above that, you're procrastinating. Something's not working, right? Something needs to change. And now you are starting to not only lose the original vision of the idea, but you are starting to devalue your own music and you're starting to actually devalue your time depending on how your new music sounds, right? Number 3, have so much fun with this because the merchandising idea, the touring idea, everything that stems from this idea is massive and you can get so creative with it.
Well, that's the thing. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
In your opinion, do limitations breed creativity or limit creativity?
Both, but in very specific circumstances.
Because I think I personally just think it breeds creativity. I don't think it limits you at all. I think too many options is way more limiting.
I agree with that. I think there are parts where it might limit you, but the limiting is not a bad thing, right? So like it would ultimately breed creativity, right? For example, I just had a session the other day and we were doing this guitar part. Sounds sick. Sounds super cool. I had this guy named Johnny come in. Johnny's great.
Johnny Be Good?
Johnny, dude, you know what? I think he's better than Johnny Be Good.
Really?
You know what I'm saying?
Oh my goodness. Johnny Be Great. Damn.
Dude, he's just awesome. He brings in his equipment, and we're laying down these tracks, man. And it's sounding awesome. And we go back to the first verse, right? Because that's kind of like where we started initially with the lead. And we were like, wow, that sounds really good, but maybe we could just redo it now. We wanted a little bit more staccato, a little bit tighter. And, the other artist brought up, maybe we should take a look at another part then. And I was like, okay, wait a second. Now that we start unfolding this, we could technically go back and redo everything because now he's warmed up. Setting a limit right there ultimately means that we got more done in that amount of time, and we were also more creative with our time there. So I do think that it does breed creativity, because if we were like, yeah, well, now that he's warmed up, let's go redo these. Okay, so when we do that, now he's even more warmed up now, so now we should just go redo him again.
Well, I was fatigued again, so like we should go back to the second take, right, because the third one is not as energetic as yeah. But and exactly, like having that limitation breeds that creativity. And the same thing. It's not just it's studio. What I was getting to earlier is when you know what songs you're going to release in what order, it allows you to think about, okay, well, how do I push that? If this is the story that is being told, how do I express that with my performances, with my merch, with how I interact with the crowd? How do I drop hints that this is the overall concept of the full album? So if you're listening to it like, oh, this is going to lead into this, but use wording that kind of hints to the next EP or release, or It's all creative.
It's all creative.
It's all creative. And now that you know what the end goal is that you're trying to tell, and especially if you've done your branding thing and you know how you want to tell it as well, like what your messaging is and who you're speaking to and what you're speaking from, you can really dive in and accurately and clearly say it so that there's no confusion. No confusion with yourself. You have the plan. You know how you're doing it.
Absolutely.
There's no confusion with your fans. They know what you mean. They know what you're doing. And I am down with this release. I am down with this music. I am a fan. Easy as that, because they understand it. There's no confusion. Like, oh, I'll just listen to what I'm used to. I'll just listen to more of this, Taylor Swift.
Yep.
No, this guy is doing something that I clearly understand. He's releasing it. I'm along for the ride. I want to be here a month from now when the next song comes out. I want to see the next EP. And how you express that.
Absolutely.
So creative.
Absolutely.
So creative.
And these people that want to be along for your ride in the beginning usually follow the first stage of the diffusion curve. They want to be the first people on the scene. I don't remember exactly what the first stage is called, or second stage for that matter, but there's a diffusion curve, right? It's almost like a bell curve. And in the middle of the diffusion curve, so let's picture this. I wish I had something drawn, but I'm just going to do a hand gesture for those watching on video. Maybe we'll put up like a diagram. It'll be really cool. But in the middle of the diffusion bell curve, do you say no?
I said no.
He's going to leave me hanging out to dry. And in the middle of the bell curve of the diffusion curve, I keep saying that, it's really bad. I know there's like a specific name for it, but I butcher everything on this podcast. But in the middle of that, you have where...
Is that a pun?
Ooh, that means it's time for the season. No, I'm just kidding. In the middle,
sprinkle on the salt.
Salt Bay.
Hey.
In the middle of the bell curve, you have the highest peak. Where that highest peak is where most people start to adapt an idea or start to follow something or start to do whatever it is that this brand is starting to put out, product, whatever. And the beginning of it, you have the first people on the scene. And these first people sometimes are your music discovery nerds that you called hipsters back in the day. That's what my generation called them, because they always wanted to be on the front end of things. Obviously, that became a more derogative term to describe people a little bit, because people started kind of roasting them and like, oh, you're just a hipster. It kind of became hipsters a negative thing. But I think that's like what it was, though, is people wanted to discover new stuff. They wanted to be the first ones on the scene. So those people want to find you and follow you on your journey, which is absolutely amazing. And those are the types of people that this really, really markets to. And it goes back to our means of discovery. It all ties into each other. And this is a perfect means of discovery. And it's a really unique way of doing things, especially when all you have is people releasing a song every month. That's it. You have a single. Okay, well, when does it become spam? When do I get a full project of showcasing who you are as an artist? Are you here for the long term, or are we just here to have a good time? Either is valid, but I think that really frames it really well. And it also ties into a very strong branding mechanism that you can use for yourself. I think it's just absolutely awesome. So I wanted to touch on that point. Back to the creativity limits. How do we make sure that we get this project done now? We set a deadline. Deadlines are awesome and they should be your best friends, and not enough people set them. And then flip side of that, people set them too soon. You have to figure out a good deadline for yourself.
So hold on. So what you're saying is, if we were in the kitchen and we were cooking
chefing
a chicken thigh and we didn't cook it enough, it would be raw and unedible.
Yes.
But if we cooked it too long, went past our deadline, and overdone it, it would be burnt and unedible. But if we hit our deadline, follow all the steps, let it cook properly and fully get seasoned and everything right, you're going to have a beautiful chicken thigh.
That's exactly what I'm saying, baby.
Yep, it's all a recipe, man.
It's all the recipe.
Get cooking with it.
Get cooking with it. The deadline is one of your most important assets along your musical journey, because us musicians, I'm a musician myself. I played guitar for 15 years now.
I'm stupid. I'm a bass player. Roast me.
Yeah, we could really get into this now, Sean. We'll talk about this later on a future episode and why guitar players are.
We gotta have like
bassists,
no, I'm just kidding. We're gonna have a side dish where you just roast me for like 30 minutes.
Yeah, honestly. So stick around for the side dish. Because it's going to be the roast of Sean today.
Woo! That's a pun too. I am so happy with this whole thing.
We're so good.
My goodness.
We're so good at this.
Oh man, I'm just a great, amazing human being who is. No, I'm just kidding.
Start dapping ourselves up. We're so good. But your deadline is your most important tool, I think, along the way, because it keeps you in check and it gives you a sense of scarcity. And that scarcity comes in the form of time, but you should also set yourself a budget. So that way you have scarcity and source of money too, because those two things will get you to act on anything. First and foremost, those two things will get you to fucking finish shit real quick.
Dude, scarcity mindset and like abundance mindsets, that's a whole nother can of worms.
And that's going to be a part of our mindset series that
we
will come up with eventually.
We will most definitely tackle in the future.
Yes. Sometimes the scarcity mindset might not be an awful thing, but when you use it too much, it becomes a very bad thing very quickly, and you have to keep it in check really quickly. But sometimes having a scarcity is an advantage to your workflow. Sometimes
there's dirty fuel and there's good fuel.
Yes.
Use the dirty fuel while it serves a purpose, and then switch to good fuel. That's all self-help and whatnot. And it's applicable to business, applicable to music, it's applicable to self-fulfillment and all that. But
yeah.
So that's a whole different can of worms.
It is. But I wanted to touch on that real quick
to
illustrate that. Like when we were talking about do limits hinder creativity or do they help foster it? It usually helps foster it most of the time, because as I said in the beginning of the podcast, art is sometimes so momentary that you'll just have a spark of amazingness within 10 minutes. And it's just the most magical thing you've ever done. And then all of a sudden, the rest of your 7 hours, you're just sitting there like, well, that was sweet, but how do I get that high back? Right. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, you limit yourself with that. And if you're like, hey, this was an amazing few hours, I'm going to call it quits for the day before I want to go down a negative mindset or a negative feedback loop of stuff or whatever the case may be, or waste my time. Doesn't matter. So
dude,
I wanted to illustrate that.
There's a whole other thing we can get into. My brain's firing off with different topics, ideas, but I think that pretty much concludes what we're talking about for now. I think we can close the book.
I think so.
Say this recipe is completed for today. But anyways, I really hope this helped you decide, okay, think about what your music is, how you want to put it out to the world, why it's important to come up with a strategy in your releasing, what aids in telling the story of your music or getting across the experience of what you're doing to your fans and getting creative with it. Get your juices firing. I hope, you're just ready to go. There's a whole much more that goes into it. We'll have other episodes, so stick around. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us feedback on the podcast. Let us know what you think, what you like. Let us know what you're doing to promote your music.
Yeah.
Because I'd love to, hear what you got going on in your world. And also, stick around for the next one.
Yeah, please come back for the next one because we got some more good topics and good recipes cooking up in this kitchen, man.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm hungry. I hope you're hungry too.
All right. Thanks for joining us in our kitchen. Now time to go cook in yours. Bon appetit.
Have fun.